Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now, let's begin. Wade Malone pressed his forehead against the cold glass of his apartment window, watching the October rain streak down in silver lines. Across the street, the elementary school playground sat empty, swings swaying in the wind like hanged men. 6 months ago, he'd lived in a house with a yard. 6 months ago, he believed in his marriage. The medication bottle on the counter caught his eye, Michelle's antidepressants, left behind when she'd moved out. He'd found them while packing, stuffed in the back of her nightstand drawer alongside receipts from hotels he'd never stayed at. The discovery had been almost anticlimactic. By then, he'd already known. Wade was a structural engineer, a man who understood load-bearing walls and stress points, who could calculate exactly how much weight a foundation could take before it cracked. He'd failed to apply that same analysis to his own life. The signs had been there for years, hairline fractures spreading through the walls of his marriage. But he'd been too busy building his career, providing for his family, being the good husband. His son Tyler called every night at 8. Wade glanced at his watch, 7:45. 15 more minutes of silence before he'd hear that small voice, always trying to sound brave, asking when he could come home. Not to Michelle's house. Home, where his father lived. The affair itself almost didn't matter anymore. Wade had discovered on a Tuesday, coming home early from a job site with what he'd thought was food poisoning. He'd found Michelle's phone on the kitchen counter, buzzing with messages. The name on the screen, Santiago. Santiago Cannon. Wade knew him. Everyone in their social circle knew Santiago, a wannabe entrepreneur with more charm than sense, always pitching some new venture, always finding investors stupid enough to believe him. Wade had never liked him, had warned Michelle about getting involved in one of Santiago's opportunities. He hadn't realized just how involved she'd gotten. The phone had been unlocked. Wade had read every message, his hands steady even as something fundamental broke inside him. 6 months of messages, photos, plans, discussions about when Wade finally figures it out and how much we can get in the divorce. That last part had been educational. Michelle had been planning this, calculating asset division, discussing strategies with Santiago about how to maximize her settlement. They'd even joked about it, trading messages about expensive lawyers and how to hide money. But it was the other messages that had made Wade's blood run cold. Messages to her father, Chester Wiley. Messages about Tyler. Chester Wiley owned 3 car dealerships in the county and believed this made him royalty. He'd never liked Wade, had opposed the marriage from the start. Not ambitious enough, he'd told Michelle, right in front of Wade at the engagement party. You could do better. The messages between Michelle and Chester revealed a plan more vicious than simple divorce. They were going to destroy Wade's relationship with Tyler. They were going to paint Wade as unstable, possibly dangerous. They were going to use the divorce to ruin him financially, professionally, personally. And they were going to enjoy it. Wade had spent that night making copies of everything. He'd transferred the messages to his computer, organized them into folders, created backups. Then he put Michelle's phone exactly where he'd found it and gone to throw up in the bathroom. The next morning, he'd kissed his wife goodbye like always. He'd taken Tyler to school. He'd gone to work, and he'd started planning. The confrontation came 2 weeks later. Wade had used those weeks carefully, quietly separating his finances, consulting with 3 different lawyers, documenting everything. He'd also installed security cameras throughout the house. Something he told Michelle was because of recent break-ins in the neighborhood. She believed him. Michelle had always believed whatever was convenient. He'd chosen a Saturday morning when Tyler was at his friend's house for a sleepover. Michelle was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, probably texting Santiago. Wade walked in and placed a folder on the counter in front of her. "I know about Santiago," he said quietly. The color drained from Michelle's face, but only for a moment. Then something else took over, something Wade had never seen before. Her eyes went flat and cold. "So what?" She didn't even try to deny it. "You gonna cry about it? Beg me to stay?" Wade had expected anger, maybe tears, definitely denial. This casual cruelty was new. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe he'd just never been looking at the right angle to see it. "I want a divorce," he said. "I'm filing Monday." Michelle laughed. Actually laughed. "Good luck with that." You think you're getting Tyler? You think you're keeping the house? My father has lawyers that will eat you alive. Your father doesn't scare me. He should. She leaned forward, and Wade saw genuine malice in her expression. You have no idea what you're up against. By the time we're done, you'll be lucky to see Tyler once a month. Supervised visits, probably. We'll make sure everyone knows what kind of father you really are. What kind is that? Unstable, angry, potentially violent. She smiled. It's amazing what a good therapist will testify to, especially when they're only hearing one side of the story. Wade kept his face neutral, but his mind was recording every word. The camera hidden in the smoke detector above the kitchen island was recording too. You've been planning this, he said. Of course I have. You think I'm stupid? I've been documenting your behavior for months. The late nights at work, which I'll say were you drinking. The short temper, which I'll say scared Tyler. The financial stress, which I'll say you took out on us. She was warming to her subject now, enjoying herself. Santiago, help me understand how these things work. You need to control the narrative. Santiago knows a lot about divorce. He knows a lot about winning. Something you never learned. She picked up her phone. I'm calling my father. You should probably find somewhere else to stay tonight. This is my house now. Wade had left. He'd gone to the apartment he'd already rented, had moved the belongings he'd already packed, and he'd started making calls. The divorce papers were filed Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, Chester Wiley had already hired Marcus Feldman, the most aggressive divorce attorney in the state. Feldman was known for destroying opposing parties, for using every dirty trick in the book. Wade's attorney, Doug Kelly, was different, quieter, more methodical. They'd met 3 times before Wade even filed, had gone over every piece of evidence, had discussed strategy. This is going to get ugly, Doug had warned him. The Wileys played dirty. I've dealt with Chester before. He thinks money can solve everything, and unfortunately, he's often right. I'm not worried about his money. You should be. He's going to try to bury you. Financially, socially, every way he can. Wade had just nodded. Let them try. The first salvo came fast. Michelle filed for full custody of Tyler, citing Wade's erratic behavior and substance abuse issues. The substance abuse was a complete fabrication, but it didn't matter. The accusation alone was enough to start the whispers. Wade was required to submit to drug testing, which he passed. But Chester's lawyers managed to delay the results being filed, giving the rumor time to spread. Suddenly, Wade's professional contacts were hearing he had a drug problem. Clients started looking at him differently. Then came the financial attack. Chester filed complaints with Wade's professional licensing board, claiming Wade had done substandard work on a project. The claims were baseless, but investigating them took time and money. Wade's malpractice insurance premiums skyrocketed. At a parent-teacher conference, Michelle and her mother Sherry Wiley appeared together. They cornered Wade in the hallway afterward, Sherry's face twisted with contempt. You need to make this easy on everyone, Sherry said. Give Michelle what she wants. You'll still get to see Tyler occasionally. I'm not giving him my son. You don't have a choice. Sherry moved closer, her voice dropping. We will destroy you. Do you understand? My husband has connections you can't imagine. We will make sure you never work in this state again. We will make sure Tyler knows exactly what kind of failure his father is. Wade looked at this woman who'd smiled at him across Thanksgiving tables, who'd held Tyler as a baby, who'd always seemed so grandmotherly and kind. The mask had fallen away completely. Is that a threat? It's a promise. She smiled. You're nothing, Wade. You've always been nothing. Michelle married down, and now she's fixing her mistake. The kindest thing you can do is disappear. Wade had walked away. He'd gone home to his empty apartment, and he'd added Sherry's words to the recording he'd made on the pen in his pocket. 3 months into the divorce proceedings, Wade was allowed supervised visitation with Tyler once a week. The supervisor was a woman named Catherine Hamilton, approved by Chester's lawyers. She wrote reports after every visit, and somehow those reports always included concerning observations about Wade's mood or behavior. But Tyler was smart. At 9 years old, he understood more than anyone gave him credit for. During their 4th supervised visit, at a park where Catherine sat on a bench 40 feet away, Tyler looked up at his father with serious eyes. Mom said you didn't want me anymore. Wade's heart stopped. That's not true, buddy. That's not even close to true. I know. Tyler glanced at Catherine, then back to Wade. I know a lot of things. Like what? I know Mom has a boyfriend. I know Grandpa Chester gives her money to hide from you. I know they talk about you when they think I'm asleep. Tyler's voice was quiet but steady. I know they're lying. Wade pulled his son close. I'm going to fix this. I promise. Ow, I'm working on it. But I need you to be brave a little longer, okay? Can you do that? Tyler nodded against his chest. I'm keeping track too, Dad, of everything they say, everything they do, just like you taught me. Wade had taught Tyler to be observant, to pay attention to details. It was something they'd bonded over. Wade explaining how buildings worked, how to see the structure beneath the surface. He hadn't realized Tyler was applying those lessons to his own life. Good man, Wade whispered. But be careful. Don't let them know you're paying attention. I won't. That night, Wade met with Doug Kelly again. They'd been building their case methodically, piece by piece. Wade had recordings of Michelle and her family. He had documentation of Chester's financial manipulations. He had evidence of the coordinated campaign to destroy his reputation. But Doug wanted more. We need something that ties it all together. Something that shows a pattern. Something that proves this isn't just about custody. It's about cruelty. I'm working on it, Wade said. He noticed something in Michelle's messages to her father, references to the trust and keeping everything clean. Chester Wiley's business practices had always been questionable, but Wade had never paid close attention. Now he did. He hired a private investigator, a retired detective named Nelson Cooper. Nelson was expensive, but worth it. Within 2 weeks, he'd uncovered something interesting. Chester had been running money through his dealerships in ways that didn't quite add up. Not embezzlement. Wade had specifically told Nelson to avoid looking for anything that basic, but something else. Insurance fraud. Systematic, organized, and involving multiple members of the Wiley family. Chester's dealerships had been filing false claims for years, staging accidents, inflating damage estimates, collecting payouts on vehicles that had never existed. It was sophisticated and it was lucrative. Michelle had been involved. So had Sherry. They'd been using Michelle's relationship with Santiago, who had connections to some very unsavory people, to facilitate the fraud. And they'd been using accounts in Tyler's name to hide the money. Wade stared at the documents Nelson had compiled, his mind racing. This was it. This was what he needed. Not just proof that Michelle and her family were corrupt, but proof that they were using his son, endangering him, implicating him in federal crimes. Can we prove they used Tyler's identity? Wade asked. Better. I can prove Sherry Wiley personally opened the accounts, forged Tyler's information, and has been actively managing them. Nelson slid another folder across the table. And I can prove Michelle knew about it and participated. Wade looked at the evidence. Bank statements, forged documents, email trails, all of it pointing to a family willing to use a 9-year-old child as a shield for their criminal activity. This is enough for criminal charges, Doug said when Wade showed him. But we need to be strategic about how we use it. I want to use it in court, in front of everyone. That's risky. If we tip our hand too early. I'm not going to tip our hand. I'm going to wait until the perfect moment. Wade's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. I'm going to let them think they've won. And then I'm going to show everyone exactly who they are. Doug studied him. You have a plan. I have a plan. The custody hearing was scheduled for late April, 6 months after the divorce filing. In those months, Wade had watched his life systematically dismantled. Chester's lawyers had frozen his assets, claiming he was hiding money. Wade's reputation in his professional community had been shredded by whisper campaigns and baseless complaints. He'd been reduced to 2 hours of supervised visitation per week with Tyler. But he'd also been gathering evidence. Every conversation, every threat, every manipulation had been documented. Nelson Cooper had continued digging, finding more and more evidence of the Wiley family's fraud operation. And Wade had been preparing Tyler, not coaching him, but making sure his son understood that the truth mattered, that justice mattered, even when it was hard. The night before the hearing, Wade sat in his apartment reviewing everything one final time. Doug had advised against bringing Tyler to testify. He's 9 years old. The judge won't like us putting him through that. Tyler wants to testify. He asked me if he could. Even so, I'm not making him do anything he doesn't want to do. But if he wants to tell the truth, I'm going to let him. Doug had sighed but nodded. Okay, but we need to be careful about how we present this. The judge is Harold Patterson. He's fair, but he's protective of children. If it looks like we're using Tyler, we're not using him. We're giving him a voice. The morning of the hearing, Wade put on his best suit. He picked up Tyler from Michelle's house. Michelle and her family would meet them at the courthouse. Tyler was quiet in the car, dressed in the button-down shirt and slacks Wade had bought him. You okay, buddy? Wade asked. I'm ready, Dad. Remember, you just tell the truth. No matter what anyone says, just tell the truth. I know. The courthouse was everything Wade had expected. Imposing, cold, designed to intimidate. Michelle was already there with her family. Chester in an expensive suit, Sherry in pearls and designer clothes. Michelle looking demure and wounded. Santiago had the sense not to show up, though Wade knew he was still in the picture. Marcus Feldman, Chester's attorney, had brought a full team. They had boxes of documents, expert witnesses lined up, a psychiatrist ready to testify about Wade's supposed instability. It was an impressive show of force. Doug had one briefcase. Wade had one folder. And Tyler had one envelope. Judge Harold Patterson was in his 60s, gray-haired and serious. He listened to opening statements with the patience of someone who'd heard it all before. Feldman painted Wade as a deadbeat father trying to manipulate the system. Doug kept it simple. This was about what was best for Tyler, and what was best was the truth. The first day was brutal. Michelle took the stand and gave a tearful performance about Wade's anger, his absence, his inability to be a proper father. She talked about finding alcohol hidden in the garage, a lie, about Wade screaming at her in front of Tyler, another lie, about fearing for her safety, the biggest lie of all. Feldman produced the supervisor's reports from Wade's visitations, each one carefully worded to suggest Wade was unstable. He called a therapist who'd met with Michelle 3 times and was ready to testify about the trauma of living with Wade. Wade sat through it all, his face impassive. Let them tell their story. Let them think they were winning. Chester testified on the second day, playing the concerned grandfather. He talked about his successful businesses, his stable home, how he could provide for Tyler in ways Wade never could. He mentioned Wade's financial troubles caused by Chester's lawsuits, Wade's professional difficulties caused by Chester's complaints, Wade's isolation from friends and family caused by Chester's whisper campaigns. It was a masterful performance. Chester came across as reasonable, concerned, generous. He offered to help Wade get back on his feet once Wade accepted reality. Sherry was even better. She took the stand in a lavender dress, her hands folded demurely, her voice soft and grandmotherly. She talked about Tyler's happiness at their house, how he'd adjusted to the divorce, how he needed stability and love. And does Wade provide that stability? Feldman asked. I'm sure he tries. Sherry's voice was sad. But he's so angry, so bitter. Tyler comes home from visitations upset, confused. It breaks my heart. More lies. All of it lies. But convincing lies told by people who'd practiced them. Doug cross-examined. But there was only so much he could do without revealing their evidence. Wade had insisted on waiting, and Doug had reluctantly agreed. They needed the right moment. On the third day, Doug called Wade to the stand. Wade testified about his love for Tyler, his stable career before the Wileys had attacked it, his desire to be a father. He was calm, clear, honest. He didn't attack Michelle or her family. He simply told his truth. Feldman's cross-examination was vicious. He hammered on Wade's financial situation, his current living conditions, the supervisor's reports. He made Wade seem defensive, struggling, possibly unfit. Then Doug said, Your Honor, we'd like to call Tyler Malone to testify. The courtroom went silent. Michelle's face went white. Chester half rose from his seat, then sat back down. Sherry's perfectly composed expression cracked for just a moment. Feldman was on his feet. Your Honor, the child is 9 years old. This is inappropriate. The child has expressed a desire to speak, Judge Patterson said quietly. I'll allow it. But Mr. Kelly, this had better be necessary. "It is, Your Honor." Tyler walked to the stand, small and serious. The bailiff had to adjust the chair so he could be seen over the witness box. Wade watched his son, pride and fear warring in his chest. Tyler looked directly at the judge, not at his mother's family. Doug kept the question simple. How did Tyler feel about his father? Did his father ever hurt him? Did his father drink or act strangely? Tyler answered each question clearly. No, his father had never hurt him. No, his father didn't drink. Yes, his father loved him and always had. Then Doug asked, "Has anyone told you what to say today?" "My mom and Grandpa Chester tried to. They told me to say Dad was mean and scary. But he's not. So I'm not going to lie." The courtroom erupted. Chester's face turned purple. Michelle was crying. Real tears this time, but not tears of sympathy. Tears of rage and fear. Feldman was shouting objections. Judge Patterson banged his gavel for order. When it was quiet again, Feldman stood for cross-examination. His earlier confidence was gone, replaced by barely controlled fury. "Son, you know lying is wrong, don't you?" "Yes, sir." "And you know your mother and grandfather wouldn't tell you to lie?" "But they did, sir." "Or maybe your father told you to say that?" Feldman's voice was sharp. "Maybe your father coached you to say all of this?" Tyler didn't flinch. "No, sir. My dad told me to tell the truth. That's what I'm doing." Chester couldn't help himself. He stood up, his voice booming across the courtroom. "Your Honor, the boy's been coached. Obviously coached. This is a travesty." "Mr. Wiley, sit down," Judge Patterson said sharply. But Tyler was already reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out an envelope, the one Wade had given him that morning, the one they'd prepared together. Tyler stood up from the witness chair and walked to the judge's bench, placing the envelope directly in front of Judge Patterson. "You should look at this, sir," Tyler said quietly. "It's proof." The courtroom froze. Every eye was on that envelope. Judge Patterson picked it up slowly, opened it, and began to read. Wade watched the judge's face change. Confusion first, then shock, then cold fury. Patterson read through page after page, and with each page his expression grew darker. Finally, he looked up, not at Tyler, not at Wade, at Sherry Wiley. "Mrs. Wiley," Judge Patterson said, his voice deadly quiet. "Would you approach the bench, please?" Sherry's face had gone gray. She stood on shaking legs, Feldman rising with her. They approached the bench. Judge Patterson held up one of the documents. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying through the silent courtroom, "how do you explain this?" He turned the document around so everyone could see it. It was a bank statement, an account in Tyler's name, opened when Tyler was 6 years old, an account containing over $200,000 in suspicious deposits. I don't know what that is," Sherry stammered. Judge Patterson pulled out another document. "This is your signature on the account opening forms, your handwriting on the deposit slips, your email address on the correspondence with the bank." He looked at her with disgust. "You've been using this child, your own grandson, to hide money from insurance fraud. Do you deny it?" The courtroom exploded. Chester was on his feet, shouting denials. Michelle was sobbing. Feldman was trying to speak, but Judge Patterson cut him off. "Sit down, Mr. Feldman. All of you sit down." Wade sat perfectly still, watching justice unfold exactly as he'd planned. Judge Patterson called for a recess and asked Doug and Feldman to join him in chambers immediately. When they emerged 20 minutes later, Feldman looked like he'd aged a decade. Court reconvened. Judge Patterson looked tired and angry. "I've reviewed the evidence presented by Tyler Malone," he said. "I've also reviewed extensive additional documentation provided by the petitioner's counsel, which corroborates the existence of a systematic fraud operation involving the respondent and her family." He looked at Michelle with contempt. "This court finds that the respondent has engaged in persistent dishonesty, has attempted to manipulate these proceedings, and has demonstrated a willingness to use her own child as a shield for criminal activity. I am awarding full custody of Tyler Malone to his father, Wade Malone, effective immediately." Michelle screamed. Chester started shouting. Sherry sat in stunned silence. Judge Patterson wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. The evidence of fraud and identity theft involving a minor is compelling and demands prosecution. He banged his gavel. This case is closed. Bailiff, please escort the Wiley family from my courtroom. Wade sat in the sudden chaos, Doug's hand on his shoulder, and watched his son walk back to him. Tyler climbed into Wade's lap, and Wade held him tight. Did I do good, Dad? Tyler whispered. You did perfect, buddy. You told the truth. Just like you taught me. Wade looked across the courtroom. Chester was being physically restrained by bailiffs, his face purple with rage. Michelle was collapsed in her chair, her perfect victim act shattered. Sherry was being led away, her hands shaking, her composure finally broken. Santiago would be next, Wade knew. Nelson Cooper had given all his evidence to the federal prosecutors. The fraud investigation would expand, would sweep up everyone involved. The Wiley family's empire was about to come crashing down. But that wasn't Wade's problem anymore. His problem had always been simpler, protecting his son, giving Tyler a chance at a good life, teaching him that truth and justice mattered, even when the fight was hard. 3 weeks later, Wade and Tyler moved into a new house. Not as big as the one Wade had shared with Michelle, but nicer, cleaner. Theirs. Tyler helped Wade paint his bedroom, chattering about school and his friends and the upcoming summer. He seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted. Wade felt the same way. The criminal investigation had moved fast. Chester, Sherry, and Michelle had all been indicted on fraud charges. Santiago, too. Their lawyers were trying to negotiate plea deals, but the evidence was overwhelming. Nelson Cooper had done his job too well. Chester's dealerships were under federal audit. His assets were frozen. The man who had promised to destroy Wade was destroying himself instead. Michelle had tried to call Wade 3 times, begging for help, asking him to talk to the prosecutors. He'd blocked her number. She'd made her choices. Now she could live with him. Doug Kelly stopped by the new house with paperwork for Wade to sign, official custody documents, restraining orders against the Wileys' financial settlements. Michelle's lawyers had dropped every claim, hoping it would help with her criminal case. It wouldn't. You played this perfectly, Doug said, watching Tyler through the window as the boy explored the backyard. I've never seen anyone so patient. It wasn't about revenge, Wade said. It was about protecting my son. You could have used the evidence earlier. Could have ended it months ago. I needed them to show everyone who they really were. If I brought the evidence out too soon, they'd have claimed I fabricated it, that I was desperate. But I let them lie, let them perform, let them think they were winning. And then, when they were at their most confident, when they'd committed themselves completely to their story, that's when I showed the truth. Doug nodded slowly. You're a scary man, Wade Malone. I'm just an engineer. I understand structures. And I knew exactly where to place the charges to bring theirs down. That night, Wade tucked Tyler into bed in his new room. Tyler had hung up posters of planets and buildings, was already making the space his own. Dad, Tyler said sleepily. Are we going to be okay now? Yeah, buddy. We're going to be okay. Good. Tyler yawned. I missed you. I miss being home. This is home now. You and me. And nobody's going to take that away. Tyler was asleep in minutes. Wade stood in the doorway for a long time, watching his son breathe, feeling something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the absence of the constant fight. His phone buzzed. A message from Nelson Cooper. Federal prosecutors just announced 23 additional charges against Chester Wiley. He's looking at 15 years minimum. Thought you'd want to know. Wade deleted the message. He didn't need to know. The Wileys were the past. His future was sleeping in the next room, safe and protected and home. He'd spent 6 months being broken down, threatened, attacked. He'd watched his reputation destroyed, his finances drained, his life dismantled piece by piece. The Wileys had tried to take everything from him. They'd forgotten the most important thing. Wade Malone was an engineer. He knew how to build. And more importantly, he knew how to rebuild. The foundation had been tested, stressed to its breaking point, but had held. And now Wade could build something better on top of it. Something stronger. Something that would last. He walked to his own bedroom, to the window that overlooked the backyard. The moon was rising, bright and clear. Wade thought about Michelle's face in the courtroom, about Chester's rage, about Sherry's broken composure. He thought about Santiago, probably running right now, trying to get ahead of the federal charges. He didn't feel satisfaction exactly. What he felt was simpler: justice. The kind that came from truth, from patience, from being willing to endure until the right moment arrived. Tyler had been the key, not because Wade had used him, but because Tyler had chosen truth over the comfortable lie. A 9-year-old boy had been braver than 3 adults, had stood in a courtroom and refused to be part of their manipulation. Wade was proud of his son, proud of the young man he was becoming, and determined to make sure Tyler grew up knowing that goodness mattered, that truth mattered, that standing up for what was right, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard, was what defined character. The Wileys had tried to teach Tyler a different lesson, that money and power and manipulation were what mattered, that truth was negotiable, that people like Wade, honest, hardworking people, were suckers to be exploited. They'd failed, and their failure would follow them for the rest of their lives. Wade's phone buzzed again. Doug Kelly, Michelle's lawyer, called. She wants to know if you'd be willing to testify on her behalf at her trial. Says she's sorry, says she was manipulated by her family. Wade stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, "No." One word. That was all Michelle deserved. She made her choices. She'd chosen her family's cruelty over her son's well-being. She'd chosen manipulation over honesty. She'd chosen to hurt Wade because she thought she could get away with it. Now she would live with those choices. Wade turned off his phone and went to bed. For the first time in 6 months, he slept through the night. In the morning, he woke to Tyler making pancakes in the kitchen, flour everywhere, smoke alarm beeping. Wade rushed in to help, and they ended up laughing as they cleaned up the mess together, then ordered breakfast from the diner down the street instead. "I wanted to surprise you," Tyler said sheepishly. "You did," Wade assured him. "Just maybe practice a little more before we try pancakes again." They ate their diner breakfast on the back porch, planning their day. Tyler wanted to explore the neighborhood, maybe find where the other kids played. Wade needed to go grocery shopping, start stocking the house properly. Normal things, simple things, the kind of life Wade had been fighting for all along. A week later, Wade got a call from his former employer. They'd heard about the custody case, about how Chester's complaints had all been fabricated. They wanted Wade back, offered him a promotion, apologized for doubting him. Wade considered it. The money would be good. The validation would be satisfying. But he'd been thinking about making a change, starting his own firm maybe, being his own boss, having the flexibility to be there for Tyler when it mattered. "Can I get back to you?" Wade asked. "Take your time," his old boss said. "The offer stands whenever you're ready." Wade hung up and looked around his home office. He'd been sketching plans for a community center, a project he'd always wanted to do but never had time for. Pro bono work, something to give back. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe he could build the career he actually wanted, not the one he'd fallen into. Tyler poked his head in. "Dad, can Patrick from down the street come over? His mom said it's okay if you say yes." "Sure, buddy. Tell him to bring a bike if he has one. We'll go to the park." Tyler disappeared with a whoop. Wade heard him on the phone, excited and happy. The sound filled the house, made it feel alive. The Wileys had tried to take this away. They tried to steal these moments, these simple joys. They'd failed, and their failure was complete. Chester was awaiting trial, his businesses collapsing, his reputation destroyed. Sherry had tried to flee to her sister's house in Florida, only to be arrested at the airport. Michelle was plea bargaining, probably going to serve time. Santiago had disappeared, was wanted by the FBI. The structure of their lives had collapsed, just like Wade had known it would. You couldn't build anything lasting on a foundation of cruelty and manipulation. Eventually, the weight became too much, but you could build something lasting on truth, on love, on the simple determination to do what was right even when the cost was high. Wade saved his sketches and stood up. He could hear Tyler and Patrick outside, already becoming friends. He could hear the neighborhood kids calling to each other, the sound of summer beginning. This was what winning looked like. Not the courtroom drama, not the revenge, not watching his enemies fall. This, life continuing, his son happy and safe, a future full of possibility. Wade walked outside into the sunshine, ready to start building again. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there. Hello, and welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. Your support means everything to us. We'd love to know, which geographical location are you joining from today? At home? On the go? Share with us below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Shadows in Paradise. Carson Davenport believed he'd built an impregnable life. At 43, he commanded respect as the owner of Davenport Security Solutions, a private security firm that specialized in high-risk extractions and corporate protection. The business emerged from his decade in Delta Force, where he'd learned that trust was a commodity more valuable than gold. Now he sold that expertise to the highest bidders, corporations, and wealthy individuals alike. His sprawling lakeside estate in Vermont reflected his success. 6 bedrooms, a private dock, and security systems that would make most government facilities envious. The crown jewel of this carefully constructed world was his daughter, Sophia, a bright-eyed 7-year-old with her father's analytical mind and none of his jadedness. "Daddy, I finished the puzzle you gave me," Sophia exclaimed one crisp October morning, holding up a completed logic puzzle designed for children twice her age. Carson smiled, a genuine expression reserved only for his daughter. "That's my girl, always 3 steps ahead." His wife, Bethany, observed from the doorway, her expression unreadable behind her perfect makeup. At 36, she retained the beauty that had first caught Carson's eye at a charity gala 8 years earlier. Back then, he'd seen a woman with ambition that matched his own. Now he occasionally caught glimpses of something else, resentment, perhaps, or boredom. "Your mother called," Bethany announced, her voice carrying a subtle edge. "She's coming to visit this weekend." Carson concealed his displeasure. Regina Fisher, Bethany's mother, was a socialite whose family fortune had dwindled to little more than a prestigious name. She'd never approved of her daughter marrying a man who'd built himself from nothing, regardless of how successful he'd become. "Wonderful," he replied, tone neutral. "I'll make sure the guest house is prepared." Later that day, Carson arrived at his downtown office to find Lyle Merritt waiting in his conference room. The man had come highly recommended as a consultant specializing in digital threat assessment, a growing segment of Carson's business. "Mr. Davenport," Lyle stood, extending his hand. "An honor to finally meet you. Your reputation precedes you." Carson studied the man, early 40s, impeccable suit, confidence that bordered on arrogance. Something about him triggered Carson's finely tuned instincts, but he couldn't place why. "Mr. Merritt, let's see if you're as good as they say." As Carson drove home that evening, his secure phone buzzed with a message from Davis, his head of security operations and former military colleague. "Background check on Merritt complete. Resume checks out, but financial records show recent unusual activity. Want me to dig deeper?" Carson frowned. "Yes, full spectrum." When he arrived home, he found Bethany on the phone, her voice dropping to a whisper as he entered. She ended the call abruptly. "Work," she explained, not meeting his eyes. Later that night, as Sophia slept and Bethany attended a charity committee meeting, Carson accessed his home security system. The logs showed Bethany had been leaving the house regularly when he traveled for business, always for 3 to 4 hours, always returning before Sophia's bedtime. The destinations were never her claimed locations. Carson closed the laptop, his expression hardening. Trust was a commodity more valuable than gold, and someone was counterfeiting his supply. Chapter 2. Blood and Water. Regina Fisher arrived like royalty visiting a colony, with excessive luggage and thinly veiled contempt. At 62, she remained striking, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her movements calculated for maximum effect. "Carson," she acknowledged with a perfunctory kiss to the air beside his cheek. "The garden looks adequate. I suppose you're too busy for proper landscaping." "Good to see you too, Regina," Carson replied evenly. Sophia approached cautiously. Regina had never shown much interest in her granddaughter, treating her more as an obligation than a relation. "Hello, grandmother," Sophia said, her small voice formal. Regina patted her head distractedly. Yes, hello, dear. Bethany, I need to freshen up before lunch. As Bethany escorted her mother to the guest house, Carson knelt beside his daughter. Want to go down to the dock? I heard the bluegills are biting today. Sophia's face brightened immediately. Can we take the boat? Their afternoon on the lake provided a respite from the tension Regina's arrival had brought. Carson watched his daughter's delight as she reeled in a small fish, carefully releasing it afterward. Dad, why doesn't grandmother like me? Sophia asked suddenly, her perception sharper than most adults Carson knew. She doesn't dislike you, Carson answered carefully. Some people just don't know how to show love properly. Mom's different when grandmother visits, Sophia continued. She gets quieter, like she's scared. Carson filed this observation away. Everyone has complicated relationships with their parents, sweetheart. That evening, Carson excused himself from dinner to take an emergency call from work. Instead, he positioned himself outside the guest house, where Regina and Bethany were having a private conversation. He's becoming suspicious, Bethany was saying. I can feel it. Then accelerate the timeline, Regina replied sharply. Lyle says everything is in place. Carson's blood ran cold. What about Sophia? Bethany asked. That child is the only obstacle. She complicates everything, always has. Without her, the structure of the trust changes completely. Mother, she's my daughter. She's his daughter in every way that matters, Regina snapped. Look at her, calculating, always watching. She'll figure it out before you do. Carson slipped away, his mind racing. The pieces were falling into place. Lyle Merritt's convenient appearance, Bethany's secretive behavior, Regina's sudden visit. They were planning something, and Sophia was somehow in the way. The next morning, Carson found Sophia in her room, unusually quiet. What's wrong, kiddo? He asked, sitting beside her. I heard Mom and Grandmother talking last night, she whispered. Grandmother said I was a burden, that I'm in the way. Carson's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. What else did they say? Something about a mall trip tomorrow. Grandmother said it would solve the problem. Sophia looked up, eyes wide. Dad, I don't want to go. Carson pulled her into a protective embrace. Then you won't. But when he confronted Bethany, she dismissed his concerns. It's a shopping trip, Carson. Mother wants to buy her some decent clothes for once, and I think it would be good for them to spend time together. Why are you being so paranoid? Sophia doesn't want to go. She's a child. She doesn't always know what's best. Carson studied his wife's face, searching for the woman he thought he'd married. I'll be tracking your phones. All three of you. Bethany rolled her eyes. Of course you will. That night, Carson received an encrypted message from Davis. Merritt's real name is Lyle Chambers. Former investment banker disbarred for fraud. Has been targeting wealthy families for years. Currently has 5 active identities. More importantly, he's been meeting regularly with your wife for at least 6 months. Attached was a photo of Bethany and Lyle in an intimate embrace outside a hotel. Carson crushed the phone in his hand, blood dripping for where the shattered screen sliced his palm. Chapter 3. Vanishing Point. The morning of the mall trip, Carson insisted on driving them himself. Unnecessary, Regina said dismissively from the back seat. We could have taken Bethany's car. I have meetings nearby. Carson lied smoothly. It's no trouble. In reality, he had instructed Davis to follow them discreetly. He had also secretly placed a small tracking device in Sophia's favorite bracelet, a backup to the phone tracking he'd mentioned to Bethany. As he pulled up to the expansive Riverside Mall, he turned to Sophia in the back seat. Have fun, sweetheart. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. Sophia nodded solemnly. The look they exchanged communicated what words couldn't. She knew something was wrong, and she knew her father was watching out for her. Carson waited until they entered the mall, then parked in a location with a clear view of the main entrance. He accessed the tracking app on his tablet, confirming that all 3 dots, Bethany, Regina, and Sophia, were moving together through the mall. For the first hour, everything proceeded normally. The dots moved from store to store, occasionally pausing. Carson divided his attention between the tracking app and another tablet displaying security camera feeds that Davis had hacked into. At precisely 2:17 p.m., Carson noticed something alarming. Sophia's had stopped moving while Bethany and Regina's continued. He immediately called Sophia's phone. No answer. Switching to the security feeds, he frantically searched for visual confirmation. There, Bethany and Regina were exiting a high-end boutique, but Sophia wasn't with them. They walked purposefully toward the food court, not looking back. Carson tried Bethany's phone next. "Hello." Her voice was artificially cheerful. "Where's Sophia?" he demanded. "Oh, she wanted to look at the toy store. Mother's watching her while I get us drinks." Carson watched the feed showing Bethany and Regina sitting down at a table, alone. "You're lying." A pause. "What are you talking about?" "Put Sophia on the phone. Now. She's with Mother. I'll have to call you back." "I can see you, Bethany. Both of you." "Sophia isn't there." The line went silent for a moment. Then, astonishingly, Bethany laughed. "Oh, Carson. Always so dramatic. I'm sure she's just wandered off for a minute. I'm calling mall security." "No." Bethany's voice sharpened. "Don't make a scene. We'll find her." Carson was already running toward his car. "If anything happens to her—" "Oh, please, she'll turn up." His wife laughed again, the sound chilling in its callousness. He heard Regina's voice in the background. "If she's lost, it's her fault." Carson ended the call and dialed mall security directly, identifying himself and demanding an immediate lockdown. Then he called the police. By the time he reached the mall, security guards were stationed at every exit. Police cars were arriving, lights flashing. Carson strode through the main entrance, his expression murderous. He found Bethany and Regina in the security office, putting on a performance of concern. "Oh, thank God you're here," Bethany cried, moving to embrace him. Carson stepped back, his voice deadly quiet. "Don't touch me." The head of mall security approached. "Mr. Davenport, we've reviewed the footage. Your daughter was last seen near the central fountain approximately 90 minutes ago. Your wife and mother-in-law entered the Neiman Marcus store without her at that time." "That's absurd," Regina interjected. "The child wandered off while we were shopping." "The cameras show otherwise, ma'am," the security chief replied coolly. The police captain pulled Carson aside. "We're treating this as a potential abduction. Given the circumstances, we need to ask, did your wife or mother-in-law have any reason to harm your daughter?" Carson's gaze locked on Bethany. "Yes." The search continued through the night. Police dogs tracked Sophia's, sent to a service corridor that led to the loading docks. Security footage showed a delivery van leaving around the time she disappeared, but the license plate was obscured. Carson hadn't slept. He stood in the mall's command center, surrounded by police, FBI agents who had been called in, and his own security team led by Davis. On the third day, a K-9 unit alerted to an area in the woods 5 miles from the mall. Officers cordoned off the scene. Carson pushed past the police tape, ignoring the shouts to stay back. He froze at what he saw, a small pile of clothing. Sophia's jeans, her favorite blue sweater, and the unicorn socks he'd bought her the previous weekend. The police dogs were brought in for a full search. 3 days later, the only thing found was her clothes. As forensic teams collected the evidence, Carson stood alone, his face devoid of emotion. Internally, something fundamental shifted, a final lock disengaging within him. Bethany approached, her eyes red from what appeared to be tears. "Carson, if she's dead," he said softly, his voice barely audible, "so are you." Chapter 4. Beneath the Surface. 2 weeks after Sophia's disappearance, Carson sat in his home office, surrounded by evidence boards and computer screens. The official investigation had yielded little progress. Bethany and Regina had been questioned extensively, but ultimately released, without a body. The police were treating it as a missing persons case, though the discovery of Sophia's clothing had darkened the outlook. Carson had taken a leave of absence from his company, dedicating every waking moment to his own investigation. Davis had moved into the guest house, coordinating a team of former military operatives now working for Carson. "Boss," Davis said, entering with a tablet, "we've got something." The screen showed grainy footage from a gas station camera 5 miles from where Sophia's clothes were found. A dark VIN matching the one from the mall loading dock was visible. The timestamp showed it passing 30 minutes after Sophia's estimated disappearance. Enhancement shows a partial plate, Davis continued. We've narrowed it to 14 possible vehicles. Carson nodded. Check them all. Bethany had maintained her story. Sophia had wandered off. She and Regina had searched frantically before contacting security. The performance was impressive, complete with public tearful pleas for Sophia's return. Regina had returned to her home in Boston, citing health concerns exacerbated by stress. The media had descended like vultures. Wealthy security expert unable to protect own daughter screamed one headline. Marriage troubles preceded disappearance, suggested another. Carson's phone rang, the detective assigned to Sophia's case. Mr. Davenport, we've completed the analysis of the clothing items. There were no blood traces or signs of violence, but we did find something unusual, chloroform residue. Carson's grip tightened on the phone, meaning it suggests she was sedated, not harmed. At least not at that location. After the call, Carson summoned Bethany to his office. She entered cautiously, maintaining her grieving mother facade. The police found chloroform on Sophia's clothes, he stated flatly, watching her reaction. A flicker of something, surprise, concern, crossed her face. What does that mean? It means someone planned this. Someone with access to restricted substances. Bethany sat down heavily. You think someone took her deliberately? Why? We haven't received any ransom demands. Perhaps it wasn't about money, Carson replied, studying her. Perhaps someone wanted her gone for other reasons. Bethany's eyes narrowed slightly. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. You and your mother were the last people seen with my daughter. You deliberately separated from her. You lied about it initially, and you have yet to explain why. I told you. You told me nothing but lies, Carson interrupted. Just like you've been lying about your meetings with Lyle Merritt. The color drained from Bethany's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Carson slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photographs of Bethany and Lyle together, spanning months. Your mother mentioned accelerating a timeline. Lyle said everything was in place. Sophia was an obstacle. Care to explain? Bethany's composure cracked. It's not what you think. It rarely is, but I'm certain it's worse. That night, while Bethany slept, aided by the sleeping pills she'd been taking since Sophia's disappearance, Carson accessed her laptop. Years in Delta Force had taught him skills that extended far beyond combat. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Emails between Bethany, Regina, and Lyle detailed a complex plan. Carson's security company was far more valuable than even he realized, with government contracts that Lyle had identified as exploitable. The plan was to gain control through Carson's death, made to look like suicide after his daughter's disappearance. Sophia's trust fund, established by Carson with his first major contracts, was a secondary target. If Sophia died before reaching adulthood, the funds would revert to Bethany. But there was something else, a reference to the facility and ensuring the package remained secure until necessary documentation was complete. Carson forwarded everything to Davis with instructions to continue the investigation while maintaining surveillance on Bethany, Regina, and Lyle. Then he did something unexpected. He began drinking heavily, visibly unraveling. He missed meetings, appeared disheveled in public, and started talking about hearing Sophia's voice. The performance wasn't entirely an act. The pain of Sophia's absence was a constant, physical ache. But the deterioration was calculated. He needed his enemies to believe he was falling apart. Chapter 5. Hunters and Prey. 1 month after Sophia's disappearance, Carson's apparent downward spiral had reached its apex. He'd been hospitalized briefly after being found wandering near the lake, incoherent and hypothermic. Upon release, he'd begun seeing a therapist, Dr. Andrea Norton, who specialized in grief counseling. What no one knew, except Davis, was that Dr. Norton was actually a former psychological operations specialist who had served with Carson. Their sessions were actually strategy meetings. They're getting comfortable, Norton reported during one such session. Bethany contacted Lyle 3 times yesterday. Regina is returning tomorrow. They think you're no longer a threat. Carson nodded. In the facility, we identified 3 properties owned by shell companies linked to Lyle. One is particularly interesting, a former medical clinic in the mountains, purchased 6 months ago. Minimal traffic, but regular supply deliveries. Security? Basic. 2 guards rotating shifts. Remote enough that they're not expecting trouble. Carson leaned forward. That's where they're holding her. Norton's expression softened. Carson, we need to consider the possibility. She's alive, he interrupted. They need her alive for the next phase. The next phase had become clear through Bethany's communications. To access Sophia's trust fund, they needed death certificates for both Sophia and Carson. The plan was to produce a suicide note from Carson confessing to killing Sophia in a dissociative state. With both declared dead, Bethany would inherit everything. But they needed time to establish Carson's mental deterioration and forge the necessary documentation. Sophia was being kept somewhere until they were ready to complete the frame-up. That evening, Bethany found Carson sitting in Sophia's room, staring at a photograph. The therapist called, she said. She's concerned about you. Carson looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. Did you ever love her? Or was she always just an obstacle? Bethany sighed. You're drunk again. This isn't helping anyone, least of all Sophia. Answer the question. Of course I loved her. I still do. We're going to find her, Carson. The lie hung between them like poison gas. I had a dream last night, Carson said, his words slightly slurred. Sophia was calling for me, saying she was cold, asking why I hadn't found her yet. Bethany hesitated, then sat beside him. Dr. Norton said, these types of dreams are normal, part of the grieving process. I'm not grieving, Carson replied, his voice suddenly clear. Because she's not dead. Bethany stiffened. The police said we need to prepare for that possibility. Did they? Carson turned to face her. Or did you? Later that night, Carson slipped out to meet Davis at a predetermined location. Regina arrived this afternoon, Davis reported. Went straight to meet with Lyle at his apartment. They were joined by this man. He showed Carson a photograph. Alexander Watts, former document forger who now works as a document restoration specialist. They're preparing the fake suicide note, Carson concluded. Yes, and there's movement at the facility. A doctor arrived today. First time we've seen medical personnel. Carson's expression darkened. They're preparing her to be found. We need to move now. The next day, Carson made a show of having a breakdown during a meeting with the detective assigned to Sophia's case. He ranted about conspiracies and hearing Sophia's voice, eventually being sedated and returned home. Bethany called Regina immediately. It's happening faster than we expected. He's completely unstable. Perfect, Regina replied. Lyle says we're ready. The papers will be completed tonight. And Sophia? A pause. The less you know, the better. Just make sure Carson takes his medication tonight. It's been adjusted. What Bethany didn't know was that Carson had been palming his pills for weeks, and the house she thought was secure had been rewired by Davis to allow Carson complete surveillance. After Bethany went to bed, believing Carson to be heavily sedated, he met with his team. 4 of them, all former Delta operators who had served with Carson, assembled in the boathouse, reviewing tactical plans. The facility has minimal security, Davis explained. 2 guards, basic alarm system. Our bigger concern is ensuring no harm comes to the primary package. Carson checked his weapon, a non-lethal taser rather than his usual sidearm. No casualties unless absolutely necessary. This needs to be clean. As they prepared to depart, Carson received an alert from the house security system. Bethany was on the move, leaving through the side entrance and heading for her car. Change of plans, Carson decided. Mitchell, Taylor, proceed to the facility as planned. Davis with me. We follow her. Bethany led them to Lyle's downtown apartment. Through high-power microphones, they monitored the conversation inside. It's done, Lyle was saying. What's completed the documentation? The handwriting analysis will pass inspection. And the medication? Regina asked. Already in his system. By morning, he'll be dead. Apparent suicide, triggered by his mental deterioration following his daughter's disappearance. Bethany's voice was hesitant. "And Sophia? You promised no harm would come to her." Lyle laughed. "She's been well cared for. But she's seen our faces, Bethany. We can't exactly return her to society." "That wasn't the plan," Bethany protested. "You said we place her with a family overseas." "Plans change," Regina interjected coldly. "Don't be naive." Carson had heard enough. He contacted Mitchell at the facility. "Status: guards neutralized. Building secured. We've located a medical containment room, but it's empty. Evidence suggests recent occupancy." Carson's blood ran cold. "They've moved her. Proceed to secondary rendezvous." To Davis, he said, "They're going to kill her tonight and plant her body near the house. Complete the narrative." Davis checked his weapon. "Orders." Carson's eyes were glacial. "No more non-lethal approach. They've made their choice." Chapter 6. Points of No Return. Preston Lake was a secluded body of water 3 miles from Carson's estate. It was here that Mitchell and Taylor reported finding suspicious activity, a van matching the description of the one from the mall, and 2 men digging near the shoreline. Carson and Davis approached silently, using the dense tree cover. Through night vision goggles, Carson confirmed what he feared. They were preparing a grave. Nearby, a small form lay wrapped in a tarp. Carson's heart stopped. Then he detected slight movement, breathing. "She's alive," he whispered to Davis. "Northwest quadrant under the blue tarp. 2 tangos digging, 1 watching from the van." Davis nodded. "I'll circle around." "On your signal." Carson counted his heartbeats, controlling his rage, focusing it into cold precision. When Davis was in position, he gave the signal. The operation took less than 30 seconds. Both diggers were incapacitated with tranquilizer darts. The van driver attempted to flee, but crashed into a tree when Davis shot out his tire. Carson ran to the tarp, peeling it back with trembling hands. It wasn't Sophia. Instead, he found a child-sized medical mannequin dressed in clothes identical to what Sophia had been wearing the day she vanished. It's a setup, he realized. They're establishing the crime scene without an actual body. Davis examined the mannequin. There's a microtransmitter inside. They were planning to find her based on a false signal from her tracking bracelet. Carson's mind raced. If Sophia wasn't here, where was she? The answer came from an unexpected source. The van driver, now secured and conscious. "Where is my daughter?" Carson demanded. The man spat. "No idea. I was just hired to help with a movie scene." "A movie scene?" "Yeah, some psychological thriller. They paid cash, said it was an independent film." Carson pressed a tranquilizer dart against the man's neck. "Try again." "I swear." The director, some guy named Lyle, said they needed realistic footage of a burial scene. The mannequin has a transmitter because it's supposed to be found in the next scene. Carson and Davis exchanged looks. It was elaborate, but made sense. Create physical evidence for the police to find that supported their narrative. "Where is Lyle now?" "Meeting the rest of the crew at some doctor's office. Said they had to shoot the medical scenes tonight." A cold realization dawned. Carson contacted Mitchell. "Check for hidden rooms at the facility. Look for recent construction, false walls." 10 minutes later, Mitchell reported back. "Found it. Hidden door in the supply closet leads to a secondary medical suite. Signs of recent occupancy, but it's empty now." Carson pulled up the tracking program on his phone, the one linked to Sophia's bracelet. For weeks, it had shown no signal. Now suddenly, it was active at Dr. Norton's office downtown. "It's a trap," Davis warned. "They're trying to lure you there." "I know," Carson replied. "Which means Sophia is somewhere else entirely." He thought back to the emails he'd intercepted, communications about the package and necessary documentation. Lyle had mentioned associates in Boston, where Regina lived. Carson made a decision. "Davis, take a team to Norton's office. Make enough noise to convince them I've taken the bait. I'm going to Regina's house in Boston." "Alone? That's too risky. It's the last place they'd expect me to look." For hours later, Carson approached Regina's palatial Boston home. The security system was high-end, but familiar. Carson's own company had installed it years earlier. Bypassing it took less than a minute. The house appeared empty, but Carson moved cautiously, clearing each room systematically. In the basement, he found a recently constructed wall that didn't match the rest of the foundation. Behind it was a small, windowless room, and inside, lying on a narrow bed, was Sophia, alive but sedated. Carson checked her vital signs: strong pulse, regular breathing, and foredrip was delivering what appeared to be a mild sedative. He removed it carefully, then gathered his daughter in his arms. "Daddy's here," he whispered. "I found you." As he turned to leave, he heard the basement door open. Footsteps descended the stairs. "The Boston police just called." Regina's voice drifted down. "There's been an incident at Norton's office. Carson apparently attacked her. He's completely lost it." "Perfect," replied a male voice Carson didn't recognize. "The narrative is complete. Once the body is discovered at the lake, everything falls into place." Carson gently placed Sophia behind some storage containers, then positioned himself beside the hidden door. As Regina and the unknown man entered the basement, Carson emerged. "Hello, Mother," he said quietly. Regina gasped. "Carson, how? How did I find you? How did I know you kidnapped my daughter? How did I uncover your pathetic conspiracy?" Carson's voice remained terrifyingly calm. "I'm very good at my job." The man with Regina, presumably the doctor responsible for sedating Sophia, reached for something in his jacket. Carson moved with lethal efficiency. One strike to the throat, another to the knee. The doctor collapsed, gasping. Regina backed away. "Now, Carson, let's be reasonable. This is all a misunderstanding." "Save it," Carson interrupted. "I know everything. The plan to kill me, frame me for Sophia's murder, and take control of my company. I know about Lyle's fraud history, about the forged documents, about the elaborate staging at the lake." Regina's expression hardened. "You have no proof." Carson smiled coldly. "I have Sophia. I have the doctor who kept her sedated. I have the men hired to stage her burial. And I have every email, text, and phone call you exchanged while planning this." He stepped closer. "But most importantly, I have nothing left to lose." Regina's facade cracked. "What are you going to do? Right now? I'm taking my daughter home. After that," Carson's eyes were devoid of mercy, "I'm going to dismantle your entire world, piece by piece." As if on cue, Sophia stirred, her small voice weak but clear. "Daddy." Carson turned, gathering her gently in his arms. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe now." To Regina, he said, "The police will be here soon. I suggest you use the time to consider how cooperative you want to be." As he carried Sophia upstairs, his phone buzzed with a message from Davis. Norton's office secured. Bethany and Lyle in custody. Evidence recovered. Carson looked down at his daughter's face, relieved to see color returning to her cheeks. "Let's go home, Sophia. We have some unfinished business to attend to." Chapter 7. Cold Calculations. 3 months after recovering Sophia, Carson sat in his attorney's office reviewing documentation. Sophia had recovered fully from her ordeal, though she still attended therapy sessions twice weekly. She remembered little of her captivity, a blessing Carson was thankful for. "The prosecution has a solid case," his attorney, Howard Breslin, explained. "Bethany, Regina, and Lyle are all facing multiple felony charges: kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, attempted murder. The doctor who kept Sophia sedated has turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence." Carson nodded. "And the trial?" "Scheduled to begin in 2 months. With the evidence you provided, conviction is almost certain. They're looking at 20 years minimum. For most people, this would be enough. Justice served through the legal system. But Carson wasn't most people. 20 years isn't sufficient," he said quietly. Breslin shifted uncomfortably. "Carson, you've won. You have Sophia back. Your company is secure. They'll spend decades in prison. They planned to kill my 7-year-old daughter. They were going to bury her body at Preston Lake and blame me for it. 20 years isn't justice. It's an insult." After leaving the attorney's office, Carson drove to a secluded property he'd purchased through a shell company. A nondescript warehouse sat at the end of a private road, surrounded by security fencing that appeared ordinary, but contained military-grade protections. Inside, Davis and a small team had established an operations center. Monitors displayed surveillance feeds of 3 locations: the county jail where Bethany and Lyle were being held awaiting trial, Regina's Boston home, where she remained under house arrest due to her age and health, and the offshore accounts where the conspirators had planned to hide their ill-gotten gains. Status? Carson asked. Davis gestured to the monitors. Bethany has been reaching out to former associates from her modeling days, looking for character witnesses. Lyle has contacted 3 different attorneys specializing in insanity defenses. Regina has begun transferring assets to accounts in Liechtenstein. They still think they'll get away with this, Carson observed. Rich people usually do, Davis replied. Carson studied the displays. Not this time. Over the next week, Carson implemented phase 1 of what he called appropriate justice. Using his extensive contacts and resources, he began a systematic dismantling of the conspirators' support systems. Bethany's former associates received anonymous packages containing evidence of her involvement in the plot against Sophia. One by one, they distanced themselves. Lyle's attorneys discovered their own legal troubles. Old cases mysteriously reopened, bar complaints filed, tax audits initiated. All withdrew from his case. Regina's financial transfers were intercepted and frozen by banking authorities acting on anonymous tips about money laundering. But these were merely opening moves. Carson had something more permanent in mind, a reckoning that would mirror the suffering they had intended for Sophia. Are you sure about this? Davis asked as they finalized preparations. There's no coming back from it. Carson's expression was resolute. They crossed the line. They plan to kill my child and frame me for it. There are consequences for that kind of choice. The plan required patience. Carson allowed the legal process to proceed, cooperating fully with prosecutors and appearing appropriately grateful for the justice system's work. Privately, he was building something else, a controlled environment where those who had conspired against Sophia would experience a taste of what they had planned for her. Chapter 8. Measured Response. The warehouse had been transformed. What once was an empty storage facility now contained 3 carefully constructed environments, replicas of the spaces where Sophia had been held during her captivity. Each was customized for its intended occupant. For Bethany, a replica of the hidden room in Regina's basement. The same dimensions, the same bed, the same medical equipment that had been used to keep Sophia sedated. For Lyle, a simulated burial site, a narrow space with earth visible through plexiglass panels, creating the illusion of being partially buried at Preston Lake. For Regina, a replica of the mall service corridor where Sophia had been abducted, complete with the sounds of children playing and shopping, a constant reminder of the normal life she had stolen from a child. Transport arrangements are confirmed, Davis reported. The prison transport carrying Bethany and Lyle will be diverted en route to the courthouse. Regina's medical transport to her specialist appointment will be intercepted. All teams are in position. Carson nodded. And Sophia? Secure at the safe house with Mitchell and Taylor. Round-the-clock protection. The operations were executed with military precision. Both vehicles were intercepted by teams disguised as federal agents with seemingly legitimate transfer orders. The real federal marshals were temporarily detained, then released unharmed once the targets were secured. By nightfall, all 3 conspirators had arrived at the warehouse, each placed in their custom environment without seeing the others or knowing where they truly were. Carson observed through monitoring systems, watching as confusion gave way to fear. Bethany was the first to realize something was wrong. "This isn't the courthouse," she said to the empty room. "Where am I?" No one answered. Lyle pounded on the plexiglass surrounding his space, shouting for the guards he believed were federal marshals. Regina, ever composed, sat quietly in her replica corridor, though her eyes betrayed her growing anxiety. Carson allowed them to marinate in uncertainty for 24 hours before making contact. When he did, it was through speakers installed in each room. "By now, you've realized this isn't part of the official justice system," he began, his voice echoing in each space. "Consider this a supplementary sentence, one that fits your crimes more appropriately." "Carson," Bethany's voice trembled. "What is this?" What are you doing? Creating consequences, he replied simply. Each of you is experiencing a version of what you planned for Sophia. Bethany, you're in a replica of the room where you helped keep a 7-year-old child sedated for weeks. Lyle, you're surrounded by the earth you intended to bury her in. Regina, you're reliving the moment you separated a child from her father forever. This is kidnapping, Regina declared, attempting to maintain her imperious tone. You'll face charges. Perhaps, Carson acknowledged. But unlike you, I'm not concerned with avoiding consequences. Over the next 3 days, Carson implemented a psychological program designed by Norton. Each conspirator was subjected to sensory experiences that mirrored aspects of Sophia's captivity: isolation, disorientation, and the constant fear of what might happen next. They were not physically harmed. They received regular meals and necessary medical attention. But they were made to understand, viscerally, what they had put an innocent child through. On the 4th day, Carson entered each room individually, sitting across from each conspirator. Bethany was first, her composure shattered, makeup streaked with tears. Please, Carson, I've learned my lesson. I never wanted Sophia to be hurt. It was Regina and Lyle's idea. You participated, Carson replied calmly. You watched as they drugged your daughter. You helped create the plan to frame me for her murder. I made a terrible mistake, Bethany sobbed. I'll do anything to make it right. Carson studied her. That's what I thought you'd say, which is why I've prepared something special for you. He produced a document, a full confession detailing every aspect of the conspiracy, including parts the prosecution didn't yet know about. Sign this, he instructed. It will be delivered to the district attorney. In exchange, your accommodations here will improve. Bethany signed without hesitation, desperate for any relief. Lyle was next, defiant despite his circumstances. You won't get away with this, Davenport. I have connections you can't imagine. The same connections that abandoned you when evidence of your previous frauds came to light. Carson asked mildly. The same ones who dropped you when they learned you planned to murder a child? Lyle's bravado faltered. What do you want? The same thing I wanted from Bethany. A complete confession, including the names of everyone who helped you. The offshore account numbers. Everything. And if I refuse? Carson smiled thinly. Then you stay here, in this simulated grave, until you change your mind. Lyle broke after another 12 hours. Regina proved the most resilient, maintaining her composure even as Carson presented her with both Bethany and Lyle's signed confessions. They've given you up completely, Carson informed her. Detailed how the entire plan was your idea, from kidnapping Sophia to framing me for her murder. Regina sniffed. Weak-willed fools. I expected nothing less. I've often wondered, Carson said conversationally, what makes a grandmother plot to kill her own granddaughter? Was it just the money? Or something deeper? Resentment that Bethany chose me over the life you planned for her. You were never good enough for her, Regina hissed, her mask finally slipping. A common soldier who got lucky. My daughter deserved better. And Sophia? What did she deserve? Regina's eyes were cold. She was too much like you. Calculating. Watching. She would have figured it out eventually. Carson nodded. She would have. She's brilliant that way. What happens now? Regina asked. Your vigilante justice served. Will you return us to the authorities? Eventually, Carson replied. But first, you're going to experience exactly what you planned for Sophia. Not the sanitized version we've created here, but the real thing. Fear flickered in Regina's eyes for the first time. Meaning you're going to disappear, Regina. Just like you made Sophia disappear. The world will wonder what happened to you, but they'll never know. You'll exist in a state of limbo, not officially dead, just gone. The color drained from Regina's face. You can't do that. It's inhuman. I didn't set the terms of this exchange, Carson replied evenly. You did, when you decided my daughter's life was worth sacrificing for your greed. In reality, Carson had no intention of keeping them indefinitely. The confessions they'd signed were real and would be delivered to prosecutors. The evidence they provided about offshore accounts and additional conspirators would lead to further arrests. But for a few weeks, they would believe their fate was to disappear forever, just as they had planned for Sophia. It was, Carson believed, a measured response. Chapter 9. Never Forgive, Never Forget. 1 year later, Carson stood on the dock behind his new home, watching Sophia feed ducks at the water's edge. Her recovery had been remarkable. Children were resilient in ways adults could only envy. They had moved across the country to a secluded property in the Pacific Northwest. Carson still ran his security company, but with a renewed focus on protecting families and children. The legal aftermath of what the media had dubbed the Davenport kidnapping had been extensive. Bethany, Lyle, and Regina had all received substantial prison sentences, 30 to 40 years each, with no possibility of parole for at least 25 years. The conspirators had eventually been returned to federal custody, their disappearance attributed to an unauthorized witness protection transfer that was quickly corrected. The confessions Carson had obtained were ruled admissible after his attorney argued successfully that they had been given voluntarily, without coercion. Carson had faced his own legal challenges. Charges of kidnapping and unlawful detention had been filed, then eventually dismissed when the full extent of the conspiracy against Sophia came to light. A sympathetic judge had ruled that his actions, while outside the law, were understandable given the circumstances. The public largely viewed him as a hero, a father who had gone to extraordinary lengths to save his daughter and bring her captors to justice. Only those closest to him knew the truth, that Carson had changed fundamentally. The experience had burned away whatever capacity for forgiveness he might once have possessed, leaving behind something harder and colder. Davis joined him on the dock, handing him a secure tablet. Final reports on all 3 targets. Bethany's appeal was denied yesterday. Lyle has been transferred to maximum security after attempting to bribe a guard. Regina's health is deteriorating rapidly. Doctors give her less than 6 months. Carson nodded, scanning the information. And the others? The doctor who kept Sophia sedated committed suicide in his cell last week. The men hired to stage the burial scene have completed their sentences and been released. All associates who helped launder money or provide resources have been prosecuted. Good, Carson said simply. Davis hesitated. There's one more thing. Bethany has requested visitation rights with Sophia. Her attorney argues that despite her crimes, she's still Sophia's mother. A cold smile played at Carson's lips. Request denied. She forfeited any maternal claims when she helped plan her daughter's murder. The courts might eventually rule differently. They can try, Carson replied, but they'll find I can be very creative in interpreting legal orders I disagree with. Davis nodded, understanding the implication. Will you ever tell Sophia the full truth about what you did to them? Carson watched his daughter laughing as a duck took bread from her hand. Someday, when she's older, she deserves to know that actions have consequences and that her father will never, ever forgive those who try to harm her. That night, as Carson tucked Sophia into bed in their new home, she asked a question that had become part of their nightly ritual. Daddy, are the bad people ever coming back? Carson smoothed her hair, his voice gentle but absolute. No, sweetheart, they can never hurt you again. I made sure of it. Promise. I promise. As Sophia drifted to sleep, Carson stood at her window, looking out at the vast darkness beyond their property. The world was full of threats, people who would harm the innocent for their own gain, who would sacrifice a child's life for money or power or vengeance.